wondered what separates a totally forgettable AI track from an absolute masterpiece that literally gives you chills? We've all been there, right? Typing out these massive, paragraph-long prompts, throwing in every adjective under the sun, just hoping the AI gets the mood right. But what if I told you that you don't need a giant wall of text to completely transform a song's emotional vibe? You literally just need one word. Welcome to This Explainer, where today we're unpacking a really fascinating experiment from AME Lab. It's their test run known as AME Lab 0002, and it absolutely proves how tweaking a single, carefully chosen material variable can completely rewrite how a piece of music feels, breathes, and hits you right in the chest. Get ready, because we're going to look at AI music generation today, not just as prompt engineering, but from the perspective of a true composer. So let's just sit with this idea for a second. What if the instrument actually becomes the song? Now, if you're looking at this from a composer's perspective, you know an instrument is never just some background track, right? It's not just a mathematical tool to get notes from a page into someone's ear. No. The physical material of the instrument is the actual soul of the piece. When you're writing or generating music, you aren't just picking a random sound to fill up space. You're actively choosing the exact emotional language your song is going to speak. Think about it. The resonance of wood, the vibration of metal, the snap of a string. Those physical properties totally dictate the emotional weight of a melody. And honestly, when you change the instrument, you change the entire language. Which brings us to this massive, kind of mind-bending claim from the researchers over at AME Lab. They put it pretty simply. One single word in your prompt could change everything. Now, I know that sounds like a bold statement, but it isn't just some wild theory. They actually set up a rigorously controlled experiment to prove it. For a little context here, in their very first experiment, AME Lab 00001, they generated this beautiful, warm folk song using a standard steel string acoustic guitar. And it was great. It felt like an open road, just full of movement and life. But for their follow-up, experiment 00002, they wanted to see what would happen if they swapped out just one single material variable in that prompt. Basically, they wanted to know, would changing the physical makeup of the instrument drastically alter what the listener actually feels? And here is that single isolated variable they focused on: steel versus nylon. They took that warm, forward-moving steel string folk guitar from the first test, and they simply swapped it out for a nylon string classical guitar. That's literally it. Just changing the physical material of the strings vibrating over the sound hole. But you see, from a composer's perspective, that one tiny material change carries decades, even centuries, of musical tradition along with it. It fundamentally alters the auditory texture. Like when you hear steel string, you instantly picture campfires, rock ballads, maybe some classic Americana. But when you hear nylon string, boom, you're instantly invoking Spanish classical, Baroque, or some delicate bossa nova. You're physically pulling the listener right off that open highway and sitting them down inside an intimate concert hall, or maybe a quiet candlelit room. Now, to prove this wasn't just some random fluke by the AI engine, the AME Lab team had to lock everything else down like true scientists. Keeping those control variables strict is super important here. The playing technique, exactly the same. A fingerpicked, arpeggiated acoustic style. The vocal, deliberately kept as this whispered mid-low range female delivery with absolutely zero high belting notes. The tempo stayed at a really slow, contemplative 76 beats per minute, so no rushing, no driving beat whatsoever. The key was held in E minor, which, if you know music, is notoriously melancholic, inward, and searching. And most importantly, the genre, the structure, and the lyrics remained totally untouched. Literally everything about the song stayed identical, except for those nylon strings. Let's talk about those lyrics for a second, because they really demand a very specific, almost fragile sonic environment. The test song was called Where the Light Waits, and it's about that kind of bone-deep tired that sleep just doesn't fix, you know? It's about sitting with grief and finding something quiet and persistent underneath all that overwhelming weight of loss. It's about a quiet grace that doesn't announce itself with a giant marching band, it simply waits. Just listen to these words, where the light waits. You don't have to find it, just be still enough to let it find you there. Wow, those are incredibly delicate, heavy words, and they absolutely require a musical bed that understands the assignment. So the crucial point here is how an AI actually processes emotionally charged words like that. An advanced AI doesn't just read your style tags like a soulless robot. It reads the emotional weight of your lyrics and actively tries to build a cohesive sonic world around them. Just imagine forcing those quiet, grief-stricken lyrics into some heavy production. Picture a massive aggressive trap beat or a huge bass-dropping EDM track or even a distorted electric guitar just screaming in the background. It would be almost comical, right? That loud, heavy production would actively fight the delicate lyrics. It would feel totally disconnected, kind of like reading a deeply personal whispered prayer through a distorted megaphone. The sound and the meaning would just be violently pulling in opposite directions. But a nylon string classical guitar, that perfectly speaks the exact same emotional language as the poem. Let's break down exactly why that works by looking at auditory texture. From a composer's standpoint, this is the physical sound quality of an instrument. The material literally dictates the texture. Nylon's specific auditory texture is rounder, softer, and way more contained than that bright metallic ring of a steel string. It has this very specific natural decay. The notes don't just sustain forever, they kind of dissolve slightly at the edges. The sound doesn't aggressively reach outward to grab you. Instead, it turns inward, practically inviting you to lean in closer. The natural, organic warmth of the nylon material wraps around these lyrics about waiting in stillness, exactly the way silence wraps around a candle flame. The finger-picked arpeggios rise and fall without percussion, without any rush whatsoever, mirroring exactly what the lyrics are asking the listener to do. Just be still. And that brings us to why the nylon string is so incredibly effective when you analyze the actual musical structure of this generated piece. The researchers specifically designed the song to highlight what they called the structure of silence. They asked listeners to pay close attention to 3 pure, unfiltered moments: the intro, the interlude, and the outro. In all 3 of these sections, the nylon string classical guitar is playing completely alone. There are no vocals, no percussion, no ambient synth pads, just the raw, beautiful instrument. This musical structure uses silence as an active canvas. The nylon arpeggios don't just abruptly fill the silence to banish it away, they gently move through it, eventually dissolving at the edges into quiet during the outro. It gives those heavy lyrics the exact space and breath they need to really properly resonate. Let's explicitly contrast those 2 textures based on the results of the experiment, because honestly, the difference in playing texture is just staggering. The steel string guitar from the first experiment felt like an open road. It was forward-moving, it had this bright, folk-inflected warmth, and the sharp attack of the steel actively cut right through the physical space. It really felt like embarking on a journey. But the nylon string, man, it felt like a closed door slowly opening. It was incredibly inward, contemplative, and still. Instead of cutting through space with a sharp attack, the softer, rounder tone of the nylon string gently inhabits the space. It acts like a private sanctuary rather than a public journey. We are talking about 2 totally different emotional worlds, both born from one single tiny material change in the prompt. Now, here is where this experiment gets truly mind-blowing. The AI didn't just passively change the guitar sound patch and call it a day. No, the AI actually reacted to the instrument change and organically interpreted the entire song differently. Because the prompt specified a nylon string classical guitar, the AI inherently recognized the intimacy of that specific instrument. As a direct result, the AI generated a vocal delivery that was significantly more restrained, way more breathy, and quieter than in the steel string version. It deliberately chose to leave longer, much more dramatic spaces between the vocal phrases. The AI understood that the nylon string demanded a completely different atmosphere, shifting the whole performance from a forward-moving journey to a quiet, reflective sanctuary. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. Are you just generating random sounds? Or are you the composer truly speaking the AI's language? AME Lab of 0002 absolutely proves that in AI music generation, specificity is everything. It's the whole shebang. Prompting guitar or even acoustic guitar just isn't enough if you want to create real art. When you prompt nylon string classical guitar finger-picked, you are a composer who knows exactly what emotional language you want to speak. You're proving that the AI is just the instrument, but you are the artist wielding it. So the next time you sit down to create a track, ask yourself, what material are your strings made of? Thanks so much for hanging out for this explainer, and I genuinely hope this completely changes how you approach composing your next masterpiece.
I have walked through rooms where no one spoke, where silence wore the face of something old, and every empty chair held someone gone, and every dusty window kept the cold. still between the hours, when even grief forgets to hold its breath. I heard a sound like water finding downhill, like life insisting on itself past death. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply waits in the quiet hush. Like a candle left in an open room, it holds the dark and breaks the gloom. Where the light waits, it has always been there, in the pause between the pain and the breath. Where the light waits, you don't have to find it, just be still enough to let it find you there. I have known the kind of tired words can't fix, when morning comes but brings no sense of day. When you've said every prayer you know by heart, and heaven seems 1,000 miles away. But even then, beneath the weight of winter, a root is pressing upward through the storm. And even then, a voice too soft to argue keeps whispering, you are not alone. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply waits in the quiet hush. Like a candle left in an open room, it holds the dark and breaks the gloom. Where the light waits, it has always been there, in the pause between the pain and the prayer. Where the light waits, you don't have to find it, just be still enough to let it find you there. Maybe grace was never loud, maybe peace was never bright, maybe all we ever needed was to stop and let it in, to sit with what we cannot